Hello and welcome to week 2 of Movement Building from Home. This week our topic is practicing community care online. I'm one of your hosts, Chad Sansing from the Mozilla Foundation, and I'm joined by Abby, and we will get things started here in just a moment. In response to some feedback from last week, we just wanted to set a little bit of context before we begin and lay out some of the plans for these calls, just to provide everyone a little more information and framing around the set of convenings that we're using. So we're trying to bring folks together in response to the COVID-19 crisis so that we can practice some peer-to-peer learning about sustaining our activism and movement building work in these difficult and uncertain times. Last week, we focused on running online meetings. This week, as I said, we'll be working on practicing community care online. And over the next 2 weeks, we'll talk about practicing personal ecology or self-care, as well as online community management. Just a quick reminder, the public portions of this call will be recorded. So if you'd rather be face muted for those, please go ahead and turn off your camera. And these notes are very much meant for you. So please join us in collaborative note-taking, ask questions, +1 things, and we'll put all of this together as we go. So welcome. Abby, you want to say hey and introduce the CPG reminder?
Yep. So I put the notes in the chat just in case. I know you can't click on them right now, but they're there, so you can type out the same thing. But yeah, just like Chad said, for community participation guidelines, just a quick reminder to be respectful, honest, inclusive, accommodating, appreciative, and open to learning from everyone else. Do not attack, demean, disrupt, harass, threaten others, or encourage such behavior. So you can see the full CPG there linked in the docs. I don't have line numbers. And if you have any issues, please report them to either Chad or myself. Our emails are linked here. And this applies to anything in the breakout rooms and also in the full meetings or in the doc. Chad.
Awesome, thank you. All right, on today's call, we have a few goals. First, as usual, we want to check in with each other and hold some space to listen to one another to see how we're doing, where the work is, what are some successes we've experienced, and what are some challenges we've faced. We also want to share some kind of practical and effective ways to show care in online communities. And then with that discussion, we also want to talk about how we might consider and practice care as a dimension of accessibility and equity and digital inclusion, not just now, but here forward. And to begin all of that, we'd like to start with sharing a little bit about our own experiences, and Abby will lead us through that.
Cool. So most of you were here last week, but we're going to be doing a little bit of silent documenting here in section number 4. So we have 2 prompts for you. What has worked well when practicing community care online? And what challenges have you faced caring for your community at this time? We realize things are different nowadays. So we'll give you about 5 minutes to sit and just type your responses here. If you are more comfortable verbalizing it or your connection's not great, feel free to just verbalize your thoughts and we will type them in for you. We'll start 5 minutes now.
So I'm new to the sort of open source, open science, community care world. And while I'm a part of many communities, I've sort of never been in any formal, like, this is how you care for your community situation. So I didn't know if y'all could also just talk a little bit more broadly about community care if nobody's talking and everyone's typing, like what that looks like or what it is, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was wrapping up a similar question about questions in the chat. So when we talk about community care, we're really right now talking about, how do you extend feelings of welcomeness and invitation to those who want to participate in your community? What are the different ways you might do that? What do you think maybe are the conditions, right, for having an inclusive and welcoming community, for having a safe community, a community that understands and works towards its members' needs for things like privacy? How do you kind of not only do outreach, but then as folks kind of indicate how they'd like to contribute or the ways in which they contribute, how are you making sure that they're successful in those contributions, that they find ways into the community and to participating in your work and in your mission? And what are some of the particular challenges facing us as we try to do that right now, as we move online, but also as we face the crisis together? Is that helpful?
Yeah, and I also think community care, a lot of people do it different ways. There's a bunch of different definitions. So even just hearing from you, what kind of care does your community need? So yeah, hearing people's responses here, I think is good. So about 3 more minutes. If you just joined us, we're in section 4 of the document right now. So what's worked well with community care in your community, and what challenges have you faced caring for your community at this time? And again, feel free to +1 things that resonate with you. Yeah, links in chat in Zoom don't work right now. There's a security vulnerability, so they disabled it. But if you highlight the link, right click, go to services, and then open URL, that will open it for you. Or you can look at your calendar invite and click from there. About 1 more minute. If you hadn't had a chance to read what other people have written, now's a good time to skim through and maybe +1 a couple things that resonate with you. All right, things have died down a bit. Does anyone want to verbalize what they've written first off? So a few things got a bunch of +1s. Saying out loud that people are welcome here and we are all responsible for setting the tone of the community, helping others feel welcome. Definitely. And I think a lot of times newcomers to community don't feel like they're responsible for it yet. So even just naming that can make a big difference in creating that welcoming atmosphere. Marilyn talks about having shared agreements and norms. That's a great point. Marilyn, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I have a lot of experience working with international communities, and I find that we make certain assumptions about what is comfortable for people, and often, surprisingly, those aren't very comfortable for communities that we are not so familiar with in terms of their backgrounds and culture. So having some kind of a place, and I know you guys do this really well, of having guidances. I don't like to say rules of engagement because those things can change and they should be context relevant, but that's sometimes building them with the community is also helpful, so there's more ownership around them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think if it's a smaller group, we definitely like to build it with the community. And I think the typical example people have is time. People react to time differently in different parts of the world. So making sure that you're on the same page of when you're going to start or how late it's okay to be late. Yeah. A couple other things here. Malvika's checking in with members, using surveys to retrieve impactful actions, and actually using them to make people feel heard and cared for. That's great. Malvika, do you want to talk a bit about that?
So I think often when people respond to survey and they don't see what the impact of the survey has been, it's quite disappointing. And often people don't like survey. Nobody likes survey. So I think if we really show that we are reading your survey and acknowledging it even out loud sometimes, and mostly pointing out to the negative feedback in a way that you're working on them to actually care for the community members, I think that works very well.
Yeah, being responsive when community members tell you how they want to be cared for or what info they're looking for. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Mavika. Acknowledging that people are dealing with a lot right now. Yes. I'm not sure who wrote that, but I think that's definitely true. I think a lot of us have felt that. We see expectations come up again, like Marilyn said. Knowing how to move forward on projects, being mindful of asynchronous check-ins. Yeah, with time zones, availability, it is tricky to work around the world for sure. And Chad is putting in a reminder from the chat. Right, and we will be talking a little bit more about onboarding in the community management week, 2 weeks from now, in week 4. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Oscar. I think that's a great point. Okay, now diving into some of the challenges people have faced. Challenges to secure funding to reward members. Yeah, not often taken into account by official grants. Yeah, even something as simple as like pizza money. I know we can't gather and eat pizza right now, but little things that make someone feel really welcome, it goes a long way. Cultural sensitivities, yeah, similar to what you were saying before, Marilyn. Understanding that participants have different social norms that need to be respected. This one has a bunch of plus ones. I'm not good with spotting other people's intentions and emotional states when they don't state them outright. And that is harder with a small online window at people, especially in audio only and text-based communication, for sure. Whoever wrote that, or someone who plus one that, does anyone want to talk about it? Thanks, Oscar.
I have Asperger. It's messy.
Yeah, that's tricky. So Chad added, yeah, finding ways to approach this can be difficult. A big part of building trust online. And it's important to have that shared understanding that's okay to let the cues and feelings come out of us. This one has a bunch of plus ones. Quite an overload of virtual meetings and coffee social drop-ins at the moment. Are you creating additional pressure by adding more options? I wonder that too sometimes. Yeah, does anyone who wrote that want to verbalize? Yeah, Brandon. Oh, you unmuted, I assumed. And then you muted again. Okay. Patricia.
Yeah, I wrote it, and basically it was like more that I was overwhelmed at the start when basically everyone started working from home, and I certainly had like 10 social coffee invites for a day, and I was just like, I can't possibly make all of these, and it's really nice that people are checking in, but this is overwhelming me at the moment. So it was more like yeah, the challenges I faced on the receiving end of really, really nice and helpful community managers that for the first few weeks, I was just like, I can't handle this. So I didn't do any socials. And now I'm back to understanding how much I can handle basically, and checking in with the various communities here and there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Patricia. Carrie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, it just makes me think it might be part of good community care to open up a conversation about the fact that people have different tolerances and limits for how many of these meetings they can do a day, and that setting boundaries around that is actually good self-care, and it's okay to not say yes to everything.
Yeah, for sure. Chad's writing that down too for you, I think. Yes. Yeah, thank you for verbalizing that. I think, yeah, we covered most of the things here. Please feel free to keep writing things in there and plus winning items and even having discussions in there. I think this has been a really helpful conversation. But Chad, can I pass it on to you for the next section?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is only called How to Practice Community Care Online because we anticipate lots of great discussion and input from you all afterwards. Not that we're claiming a lot of authority or expertise here, but we wanted to share, as we will in these calls, kind of like our approach, both in designing these calls and past programming and things like MozFest, just to kind of think aloud about the things we're thinking about and the things that we think have helped our communities come together before, and what we hope will help them continue to come together and come together for a long, long time to come. So when we think about key principles to practicing community care online, we start with belonging, and we start with this little acronym that we perhaps developed, perhaps borrowed, just called MIMI, or make it more inviting. And so we're always thinking about not only kind of like how to help people access or engage with a particular opportunity, but maybe several ways to do so. Different kinds of invitations for different audiences, different forms of contribution for folks who appreciate and enjoy contributing and being recognized in different ways. But MIMI and belonging kind of go close together in our hearts, and we try to keep them there. We think about providing enough structure so that there is a clear purpose and people kind of like understand what's possible to do in the space, what the ask is, that there are channels for coming back and saying, hey, I did this, or could I do it this way? We want to make sure that there's enough to hold on to, that people understand kind of the shared mission of the work that we might be doing together, whether it's preparing for MozFest or unpacking open leadership, or on these calls talking about how we might move more and more of our work in things like community care online. And then coupled with that, enough flexibility to care for each other. So having moments where people can kind of just check in on how they're doing, having moments where people can give feedback about not only what's working, but what's not working. Responding to questions, responding to prompts to like pause, and can we discuss this further? Can you answer this better? I'm sure on our next call, we'll talk more about what we mean by community care before we start asking questions about it, and really trying to be as responsive as we can to one another, so that when the structures that we kind of like start with and are our best educated guesses about how to begin, so that we can, change those on the fly when clearly we've made a misstep, or things can just be better for the folks in the audience. And a big part of this belonging and facilitating trust and accessibility and inclusion is just safety. And so we've tried to be, for example, right, we're like really upfront about the limitations of Zoom right now, the limitations of Google Docs. And we tried to share last week kind of like why we do these things. We try to always, right, extend that invitation to folks to participate anonymously, to register or not register, just drop in, to face mute or not face mute, to participate in these calls, or just to kind of get them in digest form at the end of the week. Privacy, safety, we think those are also part of helping people feel enough trust to belong and really participate to their fullest, or as fully as they'd like to in our community. We do also think about the power of rituals. So you'll notice we do things that try to build towards safety and inclusion, like always beginning with our community participation guideline reminder. We always try to have check-ins. That's something we do across our team meetings within the foundation as well. There's lots of different ways to do check-ins, and we try to vary it up from time to time. And if you have suggestions, we would love to hear great suggestions for check-ins. But that's something that we do regularly, so folks know that part of this time will be just spent, if we want to opt into it, sharing with one another how we're doing. And then at the end of these calls, but sometimes we do this at the beginning of calls, we have these gratitude and recognition rituals. We think it's important for people not only to recognize one another, but like to have the opportunity to recognize and lift somebody up. That can be, that can feel great when other things maybe don't. We think during times like this, having new norms or recalibrating your norms is important. So maybe there were things that were not flexible before that are suddenly flexible now. Thinking intentionally about those things is important. We think about prioritization. So I think part of helping your community kind of continue and sustain its work right now is really holding on to the things that are essential to maintain. And maybe letting go and not worrying so much about the everything of it all, and really focusing on the things that you want to carry forward with you during this time and bring with you out of this time. And we think about personal ecology and self-care. We'll talk about this much more next week. But as a leader, community manager, someone whom others might look to, in your networks, it's important maybe to model personal ecology and self-care, and to really, if you're able to practice it, to really fight to hold space and to provide time and space for others to do that as well. And this can be something very difficult to hold for yourself. It can be something very difficult to extend to others. There's a lot of intersectionality here around privilege, but if you can create time and space for yourself, model to others, and then provide ways for others, right, to figure out what would help them most right now, what do they need the most right now, what can they give themselves, and just to do everything you can to provide them opportunities to do that. That can be a great way to show care right now, and something to focus on and to carry forward again. We do think also about mutual support or mutual aid and resourcing. And so, right, there's probably a process there that looks a lot like the design process. And we think this is a good way to show community care, assessing the needs that are out there, talking with people, assessing needs around privacy and security so that your solutions build trust and inclusion and accessibility and don't put people at risk or in harm's way. Communicating your asks as well as your offerings very clearly, so people kind of can very specifically understand what they might get from you, what they might give back to you. You know, is this a way I want to use my time right now? Just as much transparency as possible and kind of the value exchange of what your community is offering for its members and what your community members are giving back to the community. That's a way to show a lot of kind of like care for people's time and attention right now. We do think it's important, right, just to communicate clearly about the risks involved with different platforms that you might be using, and to share with people ways to protect privacy, safety, and online identity despite those risks, right? More transparency is better. Transparency is a great form of care. And we think about, you know, allocating and coordinating available resources. So just as you might recalibrate your norms and things that maybe weren't flexible before, like in some cases it could be hours, in some cases it could be workloads, in some cases it could be roles and responsibilities. Maybe this is also a good time to allocate, recalibrate the allocation of available resources and to figure out where things can kind of be moved to, you know, ensure the most people have the most opportunities to be cared for right now within your community, organization, or network. We think about even in disagreement, how to show care for each other. Disagreeing can be hard under the best circumstances. And right now, just with added pressure and stress and anxiety, this can be a time where, you know, people might feel a little defensive or anxious or uncertain or out of control more so than usual. And so we encourage you to think through and adopt caring ways to disagree. There's a method that I've read about and we've shared on our team and have done some work with called deconstructive criticism. So when you notice on your team that you and someone else, or if you notice two other people are escalating into kind of defensiveness and an argument might become kind of like personal or alienating, it's a great time to stop that conversation and to reset it. And so when deconstructive criticism happens, somebody recognizes things aren't going right. Can we pause for a second? I noticed that we're really far apart on this issue. Or I noticed that we're both getting increasingly upset, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm just wondering, could you explain for me how you got to where you are and what you're thinking? And then I'll just explain how I got to where I'm thinking. And then maybe after those two explanations, we'll find a common thing to move forward on together instead of both kind of sticking to the far ends of our arguments. Providing people with increased response time, processing time right now, multiple forms and channels of communication, not in an overwhelming way, but just making sure, asking people, do you feel like you have enough time to respond to this new information? Do you feel like that deadline is something you can meet? Talking through process and developing response time deadlines, product deadlines, project deadlines together can be a way to address kind of fear-driven defensiveness right now tied to those anxieties about delivery when things can be so uncertain elsewhere. We've also talked to a lot of people about kind of like MozFest sessions and ways to help people prepare for different ideas they might encounter and think about them ahead of time so they don't feel put on the spot to respond to something yay or nay and have like a really strong opinion about it, or a really immediate opinion about something. So if you can share key information and gather some responses ahead of time to kind of anticipate or limit surprises or strong disagreements, that might be something to do to actually introduce something before your first conversation about it. Just a few more things here, and I know we're getting tighter on time. listening posts, just listening very carefully, showing care in your moderation. You might need new channels right now. There might be something you need to add, or there might be a channel for people who want to discuss a certain topic or discuss kind of like, say, like community impact of COVID-19, and they'd like that to be separate from established channels for work so they can opt in and out of those things. That can be important. So your channel should be aligned maybe with specific purposes right now and new ways that show a lot of care for who wants to be a part of which conversation. Part of that, right, is being showing sensitivity about content, and also avoiding duplication or overload. So if you are going to kind of like split some topics or some particular channel like into discrete areas, try to have like, not necessarily one-to-one, that's not always the way, right? Sometimes you might Slack somebody about an urgent email, and that's 2 different platforms, and that's fine. But just try not to have 2 things doing the exact same thing and people feeling like they need to be in both places to be heard. Now's a good time to reframe professional development and training along lines of care, to really ask people what they feel they need, whether it's an opportunity like this or something that has more to do with personal ecology. Folks might want some more training on online tools and the risks involved with them and how to mitigate those risks. Life and work balance training or coaching could be something right now. This might be an opportunity where maybe if folks haven't collaborated a lot, collaboration might help them right now feel more supported, or like the workload is more manageable, or mentorship might do very much the same. But the kind of mentorship in which somebody helps somebody else meets their goals rather than telling them what those goals should be. We do think social time has been effective for our team in kind of just creating space where it's okay to share or not share. So it's always opt-in whenever our team kind of puts things like this together. It is scheduled with care and intentionally not to conflict with other things, but at the same time, it is optional, right? We're going to try to schedule this when it doesn't conflict with other things. That doesn't mean you have to be there. Being very upfront about that, making sure people are comfortable with that. We try to keep work out of these things. They are for check-ins. If work does come up, mostly we just like try to connect people and have them carry on that conversation later. And it's been like lightweight prompts. Some people have things like pet parades, or we had some puppets on a call once. Sometimes depending on your team and the nature of the risks you face, you might share a place that you have fond childhood memories of on like Google Maps. Give people a little tour of it or something like that. It should just be something, right, that is going to fit your community, low stakes, opt-in, and informed by what the people who show up kind of need and want for that particular social experience. I do think as a community manager, it's important as part of showing care to really be accountable to others for doing your best, but also knowing that you're not always going to do your best and that you should expect to make some mistakes. And just know you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay to, I'm not going to say every mistake is like okay, but it's okay to rehearse for them. It's okay to rehearse how you might suggest moving forward from them. It might be okay to rehearse like how you're going to ask people what they need from you now to move forward together. And that's something where if you have a mentor, you have a coach, you have trusted colleagues, or you just have, you've done enough, make it more inviting, Mimi work with your team or community, just ask people, like, I think I'm going to make some mistakes in the course of working in this community. I'm going to say some things incorrectly, or I'm going to act on some assumptions that are just kind of like false. And I hope not harmful, but maybe, but in those instances, what would you like me to do? How should we keep moving? That can be important. And a powerful complement to a set of community participation guidelines or code of conduct. And sustainability. This is a time where you want to show care for people by helping them to continue their participation in your shared work together. So as much as you can, leverage creativity and have explicit calls for creativity. We think we're going to do it this way. We're trying to recreate something we did differently before, but maybe we should be doing something totally differently. Might be a conversation to have. Along with reassessing those workloads, right? Reassessing roles, responsibilities, contribution pathways, mentioned this before, but this is a good moment to kind of reassess what's most important. What are different ways to do that? What are ways that are kind of like what we did before we could keep doing? And where do we need to have entirely new methods? Good questions to ask right now. And again, just going to underline this once more, try to identify what matters most to continue online, to sustain your work, to sustain your mission, to sustain your community. Focus on that with as little kind of, I would say, useful anxiety for getting back to all that you want to do later on. But try to let go of, forgive yourself, lessen the feeling that you still have to do everything. And that will help others do the same. You can also scan for emergent funding opportunities, and please add more here, but we've begun putting together some, in particular, response to COVID-19 funds, not just for science, but including science for folks who have projects, innovations, things that they would like to propose, and maybe some of this funding can help with right now. All right, how badly over did I go? Only 3 minutes, I apologize for that. But let's open it up to questions and answers right now, and I'm gonna try to catch up a little bit with the chat. And they could be questions and answers out loud or typed into the document, somewhere around the bottom of page. I will find out in a second. 7. Any questions folks would like to ask out loud, or any approaches that you have that you'd like to share right now with the group, related ideas, anything like that? You can type it, you can voice it, and we'll make sure to take notes.
You got a nice thank you for this rundown. Described so clearly. Good job, Chad.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. And if you have to drop off, this is recorded, so feel free to, unless you just left. Someone else started speaking.
I did.
Yes.
Hi, this is Julie. Video's off because of internet, but yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that rundown. You model that behavior and everything in all of the calls you do, but to sort of see this like verbalized and written down as the outline of your process is really great, and is going to help me a lot for sort of paying this forward. So thank you.
Sure.
Any big surprises that people saw after hearing Chad's presentation? Any takeaways?
Does anybody want to disagree using deconstructive criticism?
I think good summary of best.
Sorry, Oscar, could Carrie go? Carrie had just started, and then we'll come back to you.
Sorry, yeah, of course.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. Thanks, Chad. I think it's a great list, and I really appreciate it. It's very, very clear, and hits on a lot of the things that I was thinking about. One thing I don't see there, you do have how to disagree, but I wonder about whether you have particular structures or recommendations for coming to decisions, or whether in the kind of communities that you're thinking about, that's not an activity that's happening at the community level. It's a kind of a subgroup that's making decisions.
We were just talking about this yesterday. Abby, do you want to talk some about that?
Yeah, I'm just going to say this depends a lot on each community, and it's often in open source, it's called governance. So some communities, they do try to get full consensus with everyone, and they'll do that by having an open call, hearing everyone's feedback, maybe through a form. Others have nominated a board, and then that small board will maybe vote on something. We were actually just talking about like anonymous voting systems, if it's that kind of decision. An election buddy came up. I think I've used it a couple times. I know it's the Carpentries, we've used it. Some people are from that community. So yeah, I don't think we prescribe a way to make decision making. It is important to think about though, and there are a few models you can follow.
Did you say election buddy?
Yeah,
you put that in the notes?
Yeah, drop a link, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep, done. It's at line 267-ish.
Thank you both.
Lazy consensus. I know that one. Sarah, do you want to talk about that one more?
Sure. Excuse me. So I should also say that at MozFest 2018, I think, I went to some really great sessions on decision making, and particularly the differences between things like consensus and consent decision making, and sort of decentralized models. And it was really, really good, hosted in part by the folks from Lumio, which I mentioned in the chat. Yeah, I can try to find a link on lazy consensus in a second. So it's basically just the same idea of you know, people weigh in if they have concerns, if they have anything to add, and then people's silence is basically taken as, okay, you probably don't have an opinion on this. And usually after like a set point of time, a decision is reached based on the kind of feedback of the people there. So it doesn't require every single person to weigh in. It's sort of a recognition that not everyone is going to care about every single thing, and it's trying to kind of avoid that decision fatigue. There are problems with it too, but that's sort of how I generally understand it in practice.
Yeah, I know there's lazy consensus, there's eager consensus, there's a lot of different ways people talk about this. And yeah, I know Bethany has a post on lazy consensus.
It's true.
That's what
I linked there. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, but other things would be great. I think we have time maybe to tackle this question that's already there in this section. We'll take a couple more minutes, and at 40 past the hour here, we'll try to move on to the next step here. This is a great discussion. Thank you so much for these questions and contributions, everyone. Question says, how to prioritize various tasks on community care. Interesting. So what should be kind of current priorities versus later, and that this can vary. But Abby, do you have any thoughts about things that you think of first, or thought of first in designing something like this?
I like the make it more inviting, like starting off with the invitation, and then building on from there. But I think everyone does this differently, and it depends a lot on the community. I wasn't expecting to be called on. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. No, I would agree with that. I think probably in instances where there's like imminent risk or imminent harm for a community, you want to think about how to have that convening, how to run that program, how to get those people communicating safely together first. And so like safety, privacy, security are number one. And then I think when you have that kind of space and can expand out into trust building and things like that, it probably has to do with modeling accountability, trustworthiness, involving folks in the design of the processes and projects and roles and responsibilities that they're going to have, and then just following through not only on those logistical and practical kind of community and project management things, but demonstrating your care consistently as well, which is why one of the reasons something like a gratitude ritual or check-in ritual can become very important, showing that you stick with that and are committed to that, and it's not rote and you're not rushing through it. And when things kind of break down, you stop and you address them rather than going on and saying, we'll talk about that later. Those can be kind of like in situ things or contextual things that come up that you can do to demonstrate your commitment to community care that you might voice from the get-go.
And also, to revise my hastily made suggestion earlier, I do think as like a bare minimum, having some sort of code of conduct or safety place for people to report to for any group gathering is really important. And that's a minimum requirement we have for a lot of the grants we give out. Like you need to have a code of conduct for us to fund you. Yes.
Cool. All right, thank you again. We are going to go ahead and do some breakout rooms so we have a chance to learn from each other and respond to the things that we've heard about and you've learned. Let's do, what do you think, Abby, about 12 minutes?
Yeah, 12 sounds good. So I'll set it for 11 minutes and you'll have 1 minute afterwards.
Cool. Would you like to introduce the prompts or shall I?
Yeah, actually, can you do that? I'm in the breakout rooms.
Perfect, yeah, absolutely. So yes, in breakout rooms, you'll be in smaller rooms within this larger Zoom room. We ask you to keep those CPG in mind, to really listen to each other, thank each other, share your own experience without judging others or like telling them what they should be doing. Use that common denominator of kindness. You only need to share what you're comfortable sharing. If you need help, there'll be a help button at the bottom that will summon Abby or me to your room. Please introduce yourself to your new friends this week. Who are you? Where are you from? How'd you get to this call? And then you can choose any of these prompts because we are a little tight on time. You might get to all of them. But first, maybe describe how your organization or community is already showing care. Then maybe talk about different ways of showing care that you'd like to see added. Like, what kinds of care do you think your organization, your project, your community should show more of right now? And then maybe one thing that you're going to take with you from this call to try or to discuss in your home community after this. So introduce yourself, talk about the ways that you're already seeing community care where you are, talk about community care you'd like to see added where you are, and talk about something you might take from this call, any and all. Right? Any questions about those prompts? All right, we'll see you in about 12 then.
Oh, hang on, I'm gonna move. No, we're good. Good, everyone's in a group of 3 or 4. One group of 4.
Okay.
Or groups of 3. Yeah, a few people dropped off.
All right, I will tighten that up for the next few calls, but.
I think, yeah, that was good. Yeah, that was good. Sorry. I'm just trying to start a timer now.
It still needs to be short. It can be good and short.
All right, I can just watch the timer. We already have one. We're fine.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think it was good to cover everything, and we had a good discussion there. I know, oh, let's send Deborah to a breakout room.
Should I admit her? Are you admitting her?
Oh, and I need to admit her.
Yeah.
So much to do. Hey, Deborah, we're in breakout rooms right now. Oh, again. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. We're going to do a real quick shared insights part. So here in section 8 of the doc, put in your notes anything that came up in your group, any questions that may have come up. We do have a few prompts, but please share one thing and plus one thing, because we're gonna move on to closing circle soon. But I do like some of the stuff that's coming in here now. Having smaller task force, plus 1,000. Sending pizza money, but maybe not actual pizzas. I think you can still send a pizza to someone's home, even though they're not working.
It's been done.
There's some adorable kids showing up on the screen. Comfort level with the technologies used, yeah, for sure. I know Zoom was quite the learning curve for a lot of people, but it feels like everyone got there pretty quick.
Yeah, and I think that that is something we can come back to, right, in week 4 in community management. When we come back to this conversation, it's very important about onboarding, making sure people feel they understand the workflows, they understand the processes, or can suggest ones that work better for them, so that you're not limiting people's, unduly, right, limiting people's contributions from the server side, so to speak, of the project administration.
Yeah, for sure. I do really like this question that's come up. How do we know what members need in a large community? You have some suggestions there, but I encourage people to go and answer that one. I think that's a great question. It's different for each community, but if you have any strategies for knowing what people need, please share them there, and I'll drop in my own thoughts too. But with that, I think we need to move on.
Yes, please do keep adding here. We will come back to this. We will look at these, oops, not leaving the meeting. We will answer questions, add links, whatever we can find, and we encourage you to do the same. But today, closing circle, again, just some reminders. So remember, think about how you might continue these practices. Some of these might be things you've already been doing, things that you've been reminded of, things that are maybe new to you. Work really hard to identify the things that make a difference for people right now and continue these things later on, especially because perhaps many of the people joining you for the first time now are going to be coming to you online. And like I said, even if you think of yourself as largely kind of maybe a face-to-face organization before, you'll have folks who now are coming along with you, who maybe can't be there for the face-to-face portions, but can keep being a part of your community online. So keep thinking about the lessons of care that are applicable online and off here to continue on with the folks who have joined you. We're putting the first of our 2 links to the survey here. We went in, we've read all the feedback, we've tried to add a little more context, a little more specificity, a few more ideas here and there in response to last week's feedback. It makes such a big difference for us to know what to tweak. please, please, please go ahead and fill out that survey. Help hold me accountable for going over time in my part today. If you have shout outs or thanks, please put them here in the document near the bottom of page 9. This is a chance for you to lift up members of your community who are making a big difference right now. It could be anyone with whom you're working, anyone who's supporting you, anyone that you think other folks should look to right now as a model in your community of showing care and doing all the other things we're being asked to do. If you have requests for peer assists, if you could use some links, some help, a thought partner, someone to check something for you, go ahead and put that also in at the bottom of page 9 under requests for peer assists. We have, as always, a number of resources. As I said last week, so community care has a long, long history and tradition. It is not mine. You could spend a lifetime practicing it, studying it, going back into the roots of this work, all of the contributions people have made, all the contributions Women of Color have made. We are trying to share with you our approach, and here under resources, things that are currently in our field of vision. But there's so much here you could get back into. So please think of this only as a start. At the bottom of this list, the COVID-19 mutual aid and advocacy resources. It is US specific, but it's a very in-depth kind of model template document of setting up a mutual aid resource, and some folks were asking about that in the feedback. You can find ways to stay involved with Mozilla at the bottom of page 10, along with a second link to our feedback survey. It's that important to us to get these calls right for you. And again, I apologize for going over. If you would like to talk about these things more, you can always join another of these calls next week and help hold me accountable for not taking so much time. And I would appreciate that. Thank you all so much. Abby, any last words?
No, that was great. I think next week it's personal ecology or self-care. So really looking forward to seeing a lot of you there. Cool. Well, with that, I'm going to end the recording. Bye.
Thank you all. Be well.
Bye.
Thank